All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going way back to 2000, December 2000. We're in Florida, North Florida. We're going to be talking about a guy named Mike Williams.
Yeah, this case is it's a tough one. I mean, just a lot of twists and turns and years of mystery and speculation.
It really is. And, we've got all sorts of sources on this one. We've got incident reports, we've got missing person reports, we've even got Cheryl Williams's own personal note. She's Mike's mother, by the way.
Oh, wow. So she was really, really involved in trying to get to the bottom of what happened to her son.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, she was convinced from the get-go that something wasn't right. But first glance, it did seem like just a tragic accident, open and shut case.
Right, like on the surface, it's a pretty straightforward story. You've
Right.
got Mike Williams, devoted husband, father, experienced outdoorsman, goes out for a solo duck hunting trip on Lake Seminole.
Right. And it's December. Water's cold.
Yeah.
He's wearing waders. I mean, it's not hard to imagine how a guy could just slip, fall in, and, well,
Yeah.
the rest is history.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, especially when you consider the environment. We're talking about Lake Seminole here. This is not some little pond. It's huge. 37,000 acres. Massive.
Yeah. And it's not exactly the easiest place to search either, right? I mean, we've got maps of the lake here, and you've got all these little inlets, tons of vegetation. Like, who knows what's lurking under the surface?
Yeah. It's a nightmare for search and rescue. I mean, think about it. You've got limited visibility for divers, all those weeds and stuff.
Yeah.
And you've got alligators. I mean, it's a dangerous place to be searching.
Totally. I mean, just the thought of being out there alone in that kind of environment is kind of creepy. So anyway, this massive search kicks off, right? Everyone's hoping for the best, but the odds are stacked against them. Weeks go by, and then finally they find Mike's boat.
Empty.
Empty. But here's the thing. All his gear's still on board. His gun, his decoys, everything. And that kind of seemed to back up the whole accidental drowning theory.
Makes sense. If he fell out, his stuff would still be in the boat.
Exactly. But when you look at the report, some of the details, I don't know, they just don't quite add up.
Like what? What kind of details?
Well, for one thing, they found the boat miles away from where Mike usually launched, and the engine was still running.
The engine was running. That's a bit odd.
Right. I mean, if he just fell out, wouldn't the engine cut off or something?
Yeah, you'd think so, unless, I don't know, maybe he hit something? Or maybe there was some kind of mechanical issue?
Maybe, but then there's this whole thing about his waders and jacket. I mean, they eventually found them, but they were in almost perfect condition, like barely a scratch.
Really? After being in the water for months?
Months. You'd think they'd be, I don't know, ripped up or at least have some signs of wear and tear, right? Maybe even some alligator bites.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, alligators in that lake, they're not exactly known for being gentle.
Right. So how do you explain that? I mean, could an alligator have taken Mike's body without leaving a single mark on his clothes?
It's possible, I guess, but it seems unlikely. Especially in cold water, alligators, they tend to scavenge. They go for easy meals.
Right.
They're not known for being picky eaters or like carefully removing clothes before they chow down.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So the more we learn, the more this whole accidental drowning theory just starts to, I don't know, fall apart.
Yeah.
And honestly, no one was more skeptical about the official story than Mike's mom, Cheryl. I mean, she was like a dog with a bone. She just wouldn't let it go.
She sounds like a force to be reckoned with.
She was. I mean, she was poring over weather reports, consulting with reptile experts. Like, she even put together this whole 27-page document outlining all the inconsistencies she found.
Wow, 27 pages. That's some serious dedication.
Right. I mean, she wasn't a cop or a detective, but she was approaching this like a full-on investigator. She just had this gut feeling that something was terribly wrong, and she refused to back down.
And it sounds like she was on to something. I mean, those inconsistencies, they can't be ignored, right? They have to mean something.
And you know what? She was right. After years of pushing and pushing, the case was finally reclassified as a suspicious missing person.
That's a huge step. I mean, that basically means law enforcement was finally admitting that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this than a simple drowning.
Exactly. And that shift, that little change in how they were viewing the case, well, it opened up a whole new can of worms. All right, so we're back. And let me tell you, this is where things get really wild. We've got this missing person case, right? Mike Williams vanished off the face of the earth. And we've got his mom, Cheryl, who's like a one-woman army, convinced there's foul play involved. But for years, the case goes nowhere. Then, bam, 2016, something happens that throws everything into a tailspin.
Yeah, this is where the case takes a turn you just wouldn't see coming. Ready for this? Denise, Mike's widow, remember, she gets kidnapped
Wait, what? Kidnapped? By who?
by Brian. Brian Winchester, Mike's best friend, the guy who was supposedly helping with the search all those years ago.
Oh, wow. Hold on. So, the best friend marries the grieving widow, and then years later, he kidnaps her. What in the world is going on here?
Well, it seems like their marriage was falling apart,
Hmm.
and Brian, he was having some problems, money troubles, maybe some other stuff going on. And he gets it in his head that Denise is going to leave him.
So he freaks out and kidnaps her.
Pretty much. It was a desperate move, like he
Hmm.
was trying to control the situation, but it obviously backfired big time.
Yeah, no kidding. But how did Denise react to all this? I mean, being kidnapped by your own husband, that's got to be terrifying.
Well, that's the thing. Denise, she's a smart cookie. Instead of just panicking, she starts thinking on her feet. She actually drives Brian to a pharmacy, knowing there would be security cameras there.
Oh, wow. So she was trying to leave a trail even while she was being held hostage?
Exactly. She knew that if anything happened, there would be evidence, and she stalled for time, hoping someone would notice what was going on.
That's incredible. I mean, talk about thinking under pressure. So did her plan work?
It did. The cops were able to track them down, thanks to the cameras and Denise's quick thinking. They arrested Brian and charged him with kidnapping.
Okay, so Brian's behind bars, but how does this help solve Mike's disappearance? I mean, it's been years at this point.
Well, here's the key. Remember, Denise and Brian were divorced by this time, so she couldn't use spousal privilege to avoid answering questions.
Ah, I get it. The cops could finally grill her about what she knew about Mike's disappearance without her lawyer shutting them down.
Exactly. And they went hard on her. They were like, look, Brian's talking. He might be confessing. We know you know something. It's time to come clean.
So did she crack?
No, she didn't. She stuck to her story. Said she thought Mike had drowned and that she had no idea what Brian was up to. But the cops, they weren't buying it.
I bet they weren't. So what did they do?
They had a trump card,
Yeah.
Brian. They went to him in jail and offered him a deal. Confess to what really happened to Mike and you'll get immunity for the murder.
Whoa, hold on. So they're going to let a murderer walk free just to get Denise?
It was a gamble, for
Yeah.
sure. But they knew that if they could get Brian to flip, they could finally close this case.
And did he take the deal? Did Brian finally tell the truth?
He did. And what he revealed was absolutely shocking.
Okay, so we're back, and we left off with Brian Winchester, Mike Williams' best friend, confessing to his murder. I mean, talk about a bombshell, right? But here's the thing. Just because Brian's singing like a canary doesn't automatically mean Denise is going down too.
Right. Confessions are tricky. I mean, and they're powerful evidence, but they don't always tell the whole story.
Mm.
In juries, they can be skeptical, especially when the person confessing is already a convicted kidnapper, like Brian.
Yeah, that's fair. So how do the prosecutors even begin to build a case against Denise? I mean, it's been like 17 years since Mike vanished. What kind of evidence could they possibly find to connect her to the murder?
Well, they had to get creative. Instead of
Yeah.
focusing on physical evidence, which was pretty much non-existent at this point, they went after the timeline.
The timeline.
Yeah, like the sequence of events. Denise was adamant that she had no clue about Brian's plan, that she truly believed Mike had drowned. So the prosecutors, they set out to prove that her story was full of holes.
Okay, so how did they do that?
Well, they dug up all sorts of stuff. They found police reports showing that Brian's car had been spotted near Denise's house way back when Mike was still alive. Brian even admitted he parked there sometimes to avoid being seen, while he was visiting Denise.
So they were already hooking up before Mike disappeared.
Oh, yeah. And this totally contradicted Denise's claim that their affair started after Mike was gone.
So basically, they were catching her in a lie.
Exactly. And they didn't stop there. They tracked down people who had seen Brian and Denise together at different times, parties, events, even just out and about. And these weren't just quick hellos, These were like intimate moments that suggested a much deeper relationship than they were letting on.
Like what kind of moments?
Well, there was this one friend, Angela. She testified about a night out where Mike got really upset because Brian and Denise were all over each other. And then, get this, later that night, Angela hooks up with Brian and Denise just barged in on them. Like she was furious, jealous, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. It's like they were living this whole secret life right under Mike's nose.
Right. And the prosecution, they brought in witness after witness, each one chipping away at Denise's story. They were painting this picture of a couple who were deeply involved, romantically, while Mike was still alive. And that, of course, pointed to a pretty strong motive.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to be together, Mike was definitely in the way.
No doubt about it. And don't forget about Brian's ex-wife, Kathy. She testified about finding a receipt for a piece of jewelry. And guess what? It had Denise's nickname on it.
Oh, man. That's pretty incriminating.
Right. So they got this whole timeline, they've got witnesses, and they've got Brian's confession. But the big question is, will it be enough to convince a jury?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. Can they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Denise was in on the whole murder plot?
Well, the defense, they tried their best.
Yeah.
They basically said, look, Brian's a liar. He's just trying to save his own skin. They painted Denise as a victim, manipulated by this evil mastermind husband.
I bet Cheryl wasn't buying that for a second.
Oh, absolutely not. She was in that courtroom every single day, staring Denise down. But in the end, it was up to the jury to decide.
And what did they decide?
After 8 hours of deliberation, they came back with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after the fact.
Wow, guilty on all counts. That must have been a huge victory for Cheryl.
It was. But it was bittersweet, you know. She finally got justice from Mike, but he couldn't bring him back.
So what happened to Denise? What was her sentence?
She was initially given life in prison, but later on appeal, they actually overturned the first-degree murder and accessory charges. There wasn't enough evidence to directly link her to the actual killing.
Oh, wow. So she got off on some of the charges.
Yeah, but the conspiracy to commit murder conviction, that stuck, and that came with a 30-year sentence.
Yeah.
She tried to appeal that too, but the judge, he wasn't having it. He said, look, you were part of this plot. You knew what was going on.
So in the end, both Brian and Denise were held accountable for their actions, even though their paths through the legal system were pretty different. And Cheryl, after 17 years of fighting, she finally got some closure.
This case, it's a wild one, right? I mean, it just shows you how easily appearances can deceive, how the people you think you know can be capable of just awful things. And it's a testament to Cheryl's strength, her refusal to give up on her son.
It really is, and it makes you think, right?
Yeah.
About how important it is to trust your gut, to question things, to dig deeper when something doesn't feel right. Because sometimes the truth is hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be uncovered.
Absolutely. And sometimes it takes someone like Cheryl with a relentless determination and her unwavering love to shine a light on that truth and bring it to justice.
Well, that's about it for our deep dive into the Mike Williams case. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another intriguing story. Until then, keep those critical thinking caps on, and remember, nothing is ever quite as it seems.